Welcome to the best of first-person episodes from Phantoms and Monsters. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of all future uploads.
Unknown Dogman Biped, negative energy Lurk in Fredericksburg, Virginia woods. So I don't have to stop and explain later. First I need to say that my mother is a medium. She can see ghosts, shadow people and entities from other places. I don't have her abilities, but she is able to feel things through me, no matter how far apart we are. For fun I used to hold a key or ring of a coworker, and she would do a reading that way while I was at work, and the info she got made many of them cry. So with that in mind, back in 2012 I was living in Virginia, she was in Ohio. A girl I was dating lived in a small home along Poplar Road in Fredericksburg, Virginia. She was a ways out surrounded by woods. For weeks she had been telling me she had been having bad feelings about her property and constantly feeling like she was being watched. One night while we were talking about it, I decided to call my mom and get her opinion. Mom said she could feel something negative, but it was trying to hide from her. It was not far behind the girl's home. Not sure what I was thinking, but I decided to go out back and see if I could see anything or get closer, and maybe she could get a better read. I remember this night was dark with no moon. I was on the phone and my girlfriend was using her phone light to guide us. About 30 yards into the woods my mom suddenly told us to stop and back up. The entity was right in front of us and it was pure evil. I didn't see anything but did as she asked. She went on to say that whatever it was had been in the area a very long time, and people do rituals in the woods nearby that give this being power. And sadly there would be nothing anyone could do to chase it off. She advised the girl to move and try to not think about the being or it may follow, and that would be very bad. A few hours later I stepped out the front door and took 2 steps to the left to be startled by something jumping up from behind a bush maybe 3 feet away. It was pitch black, I couldn't see anything, but whatever it was took off running into the woods going north. It was clearly a 2-legged creature and it being late fall, I could hear the steps on the dry leaves quickly disappearing. It was zigzagging through the trees at a rate that seemed impossible due to the darkness and number of trees it had to run through. The terror that hit me, all I could do was stand there. It seemed to navigate through the dark and trees faster than I could have run down a straight roadway. Looking back, if I had to guess, I think it may have been a Dogman based on the speed and the lightness of the steps. It definitely didn't sound like a 800-pound Bigfoot. I think about this night still because I just don't know what it was. And could it have been working alongside the evil entity? Strange coincidence to have both these events in one night. Maybe not a great story, but one that I'll never forget. Thank you. JG.
Upright canine Dogman charges witnesses in northeast Montana. This incident occurred in summer of 1993 in rural northeast Montana. While driving home one evening, I spot something in the middle of the road up ahead. My friend in the passenger seat notices it at the same time and says, "What the F is that, dude?" At first, we can't tell what we are looking at, but as the car draws nearer to the big black shape in the middle of the road, it starts to look like a mass of fur. I think it must be an animal, but it looks big enough to do damage to my car, so I slow down and stop the car about 20 feet away from the thing. At this point, it is completely illuminated by the headlights, but neither of us can figure out what the hell kind of animal it might be. Since it hasn't moved, we assume it must be dead and start to argue over who will drag it over to the side of the road. That's when the thing starts to rise up. We silently watch as it stirs, then suddenly stands up. I preface the next part of the story with, I know this sounds crazy, but I really can't describe what I saw, because I had never seen anything like it before. The closest I can come is this: the thing, whatever it was about 7 feet tall when it rose to its full height. Its body was shaped like a human male, but it was covered with a thick dark fur. The head was not human. It looked almost like a jackal or a German shepherd, with a long snout and pointed ears, and its eyes were glowing in the headlights the way that a cat's eyes sometimes glow. It was staring right at us. I don't know how long we stared back at the thing before we noticed that it was clutching a dead rabbit in one of its enormous hands, or paws. I had barely had time to register this bit of information when the creature suddenly flung the dead rabbit away and took several steps toward the car. We both screamed, and I slammed the car into reverse, made a U-turn, and got the hell out of there. JM.
Terrifying upright canine Dogman encounter in Matanuska-Susitna Valley, Alaska. I was traveling on a local road in the Matanuska-Susitna Valley, about 30 miles north of Anchorage, Alaska. This occurred in the fall of 1998. It was close to midnight when my headlights caught a large, dark figure up ahead. I'm bad at judging distance, but I believe it was maybe 6 car lengths away. I instinctively let off the gas, coasting closer. At first I assumed it was a moose, as the area is infested with them. But no, it was standing upright. Bear, then. No, not a bear. It looked so strange. It was tall enough to be an uncommonly large bear, but far too slender. It looked like it had spikes running down its neck and back. Was I being pranked? All those thoughts ran through my head in a fraction of a second. The car was still coasting closer and I could see more details. It was standing in profile, gazing across the road. I could clearly see its wolf-like muzzle and large upright ears. The spikes on its back were in fact clumps of fur. His spine curved in a smooth, very natural-looking way. It was standing in the ditch, inches from the road surface. Because I was focused on its upper body, I do not recall anything about its back legs or if it had a tail. I did see its front legs though. These were very dog-like, hanging awkwardly down and slightly toward its front. Exactly as you'd expect if a dog stood upright. While it clearly had a canine look, there was still something off about it that I cannot articulate. It was perfectly still, and at this point, given the proximity to Halloween, I was quite convinced it was some sort of Halloween prop, because it was clearly not any kind of existing animal. I was deeply impressed and gently stepped on the brakes, intending to stop and examine it closely. Then it turned its head towards me. In the tiny fraction of a second that it took for it to swivel its head, I knew I had made a terrible mistake. The fluidness of its movement removed any and all doubt that this was some kind of prop. It was horribly, terrifyingly alive. The pale off-white glow of its eyes shine in the headlights destroyed any possibility of a human in a costume. I think I sat there gaping at it in shock for a few seconds, the car barely moving by now, but still inching closer. As I was almost upon it, I think it could have leaned forward and touched the car if it had wanted. I had to look up to see his face. Again, I'm a bad judge of such things, but I am 5'4", and it was a hell of a lot taller than me. Tall like a polar bear standing. 7 to 8 feet at least, I really can't say. I snapped out of my trance and slammed on the gas. The car fishtailed and I prepared myself for death by monster, as I was certain I'd end up in the ditch, but the tires caught the pavement, and I drove like a complete maniac all the way home. I did not look back.
Upright canine Dogman encounter in Managua, Nicaragua. Barrios. My mom used to take me to stay with my grandma who lived about 3.5 miles away, close to Lake Nicaragua, which is infested with bull sharks. The area where grandma lived was under constant construction, and the city was deforesting the area to make more houses. Light posts were spread throughout the area where no homes were yet built. There were creeks that went under bridges, and one could walk to other barrios, or parts of the neighborhood that were closer to the lake and the mountains. A lot of native people lived there. They cooked rice and beans on the stove and by hand on a kummal hand-made tortillas. My mother had a knack of sending me to those neighborhoods to buy beans and tortillas, which is what I did that afternoon. I had never believed in werewolves or witches or anything supernatural or unknown, but this shocked me to understand the importance of keeping an open mind and to know and respect others who have seen the paranormal. I was heading with 2 plastic containers to buy the beans and tortillas that afternoon by my grandma's house. I had to go through an area where a creek went all the way to Lake Nicaragua and still had a lot of forested areas there and had encroaching buildings that were being built but not finished yet. The road I walked on was in between the forest and creek alongside. As one got closer to my grandma's neighborhood, the unfinished buildings were apparent with few trees about, and the creek became part of a waterway. To get across, you had to walk on a bridge to get to the road that lead to the outskirts of the city of Managua, which is where my grandma's house was, in an area called America's Number 2. Anyway, on the way to buy mom's beans and tortillas, I had no ill feelings on the road. The sun was still up, it was about 6:30 p.m. Since we are near the equator, there is still sunlight at that time. It took me approximately 1 hour to do this. I had no worries since the people around the area knew me. On the way back to grandma's, as I got close to where the new buildings were being constructed, it was already dark and there was a full moon that night. It was around 7:45 p.m., since I always had a watch with me, since I like watches a lot. As a matter of fact, I still wear a watch today. Anyway, as I had finished crossing the bridge, I came up to a building which had not been finished and had no roof or doors, and it was about 150 yards from the creek and wood line. The moon happened to light the building and leave places dark on the ground and light up the mid-level places around 5 feet and up as the moonlight hit the building at an angle. As I walked in front of a door by the road, suddenly I heard a growling sound, like a dog growl. I was never fond of dogs, since they always seemed to chase me, and had one bit me when I was 6. But now I'm grown up and actually like dogs and cats. Anyway, as I heard this sound, I don't know if it was curiosity or stupidity, I decided to investigate by backtracking and seeing if in fact it was a wild dog with rabies, since rabies at that time was rampant in our country. This way I knew whether to expect an attack or just to get a rock in one of my hands in case it decided to mess with me. Well, to my horrific surprise, I come up to the door of the building, only to be 10 feet from a thing that I only saw in the movies, like The Howling. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This thing slowly began to rise from a hunched position to where the moonlight hit its face, and mind you, this was a one-story building with no roof. This building was at least 8.5 feet tall, yet this thing's head was maybe 5 inches above it. I was having trouble speaking. I was in a state of awe and disbelief. This thing had pointy black ears and a mid-sized snout like a German shepherd, and it had a yellow glow to its eyes. It had hands like a raccoon's, but with a curve to them. Suddenly my reaction came, and I spoke out loud and said no. At this point this creature heard me and immediately turned its head to see me. I realized. At this point I had 2 choices: stay and hope it didn't eat me, or run the mile left to my grandma's house. I can tell you the second option was better. I immediately turned and ran in the direction of grandma's house. I felt the thing behind me, but I dared not look. I ran, and the funny thing is I didn't even drop my mom's containers that were with me. I ran all the way to my grandma's house, and I ran into the house. The good thing was that in those days grandma always left the door open. I ran inside and ran past my mom and my grandma. I then rushed to the kitchen and put mom's containers on the counter. I took the steak knives that grandma had and told my mom and grandma it's after me and I'm ready. At this point my mom and grandma tried to convince me that I was okay and to put the knives down. I did not put the knives down until I was sure that the monster was not showing up to attack grandma's house. I had nightmares and horrible dreams for about 2 years after that. But this was not the last time I would see something like this creature. Name withheld.
This is Lon Strickler. If you like this program, it would help us if you would give it a thumbs up. Then subscribe and click the bell icon so you get notification when we upload new first-person encounters. We have many more to come very soon. And by the way, if you have a suggestion or an experience of your own, please leave a comment.